Put your happy face on.
It's happy.
Well, hello everybody. Welcome to another episode of the 11 Bang Bang channel. I'm your host, Ethan Woods, and this is...
Garrett. I have to make the announcement.
Yes, you have to make the
I thought you were
announcement.
sending me away.
I'm not sending you away. You abandoned me.
Alright guys, so we're having a little bit of a brand split here. We have a sister channel going called Smoke in the Woods. Brother channel. I call it brother channel. And which means Ethan and Caleb are going to be doing more of the filming over here on 11 Bang Bang. I will still be here periodically to do the bigger videos for the Trapdoor series and whatnot, and whenever I need to fill in to make a video. But the other channel is called Smoke in the Woods, and I'm not sure what the release dates are going to be on it yet. There's already a couple videos. It's just kind of breaking up so that my brother Noah and I have a little something to do over there, and Ethan and Caleb have a little something to do over here, and then we'll have collaborations in the middle.
So what you're saying is you're seceding from the channel.
Secession is a strong word.
So in other news, while we're here, I think we're going to start moving our videos to Sunday night release time instead of Sunday morning. And that's mainly for the fact of the matter is that right now we're very busy with a bunch of different projects going on. And yeah, it's just a little more feasible. And I'm going to try to keep putting some content out, guys, but yeah, just bear with me. I got some things going. I got some fires, or some irons in the fire right now, if you would. So
those are two. The banshees are howling out.
Yeah, the wind's blowing 90 for nothing, and the rain is coming down, and Caleb's holding the door shut. So without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about what we came here to talk about, which is this.
The gun that won the West.
Yes.
Part 2.
Yeah, the gun that won the West, Part 2. H&E Leman.
Okay, so guys, this is one of my all-time favorite style of rifles, and we're not going to delve real deep into the history on this week's video because next week we're hopefully going to have a shooting video out on this, and I'll really delve into some history on it at that point, and Ethan will be shooting it. But just so that you know, this is probably the most common muzzleloader on the frontier. That is a rifle between 1835 to technically 1837.
Nuh-uh. The Hawken was. Don't you know anything?
They made,
what, 10 of these to every Hawken?
Yeah, more than that.
Like 100?
But anyway, the long and short of it is, this is the Leman Rifle. It's very underappreciated. Nobody has ever sat down, to the best of my knowledge, and actually wrote a book about these. But these guns they began producing them in 1835. Henry Leman got a government contract for native trade rifles in 1837, and he cranked out a lot of these, and they were made in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, the famous Lancaster rifles. And what happened was, really, he got all the gunsmiths in Lancaster under one roof and kind of killed the Lancaster long rifle building business, and all under one roof.
Just put it all into one batch.
Yes.
One rifle.
Pretty much got all the gunsmiths in Lancaster working in one company for him. And he had a ton of trade guns. He had, from what I understand, 3 grades of guns. He had your high-end grade, which this is not. They will usually have a star over here on the cheek piece. He had a kind of a hardware store grade, which is what this is, which double set triggers, sugar maple, but not curly. We'll get to that in just a second.
Got beautiful tiger stripe on there, though.
And he also had a trade gun, which is what the most of them that he made were, and those were the Indian trade guns. They were usually in big 58 caliber or something like that, and they were single set trigger. And he did a lot of these early on in flintlock. A lot of them have been converted since then. There's not a whole lot of flintlock Lemans left around today. From 37 to the mid 40s, it was really popular to do these full long length stocks, but as the 1840s rolled around, 50s, that's when the half stock became popular, and they really started making half stock guns. So we can kind of date this gun right here to anywhere from 1835 in my mind, just from the things I've read, and there's not a lot of information, but from what I've read, I would date this gun from anywhere from 1835 to 1845.
Yeah, and that one little article I was reading the other day, it was funny because they said most of them were 30-inch barrels, which I find interesting because this one's actually got a 43-inch barrel on it.
That's the half. That's the half stock trade gun.
Yeah.
So before that, they were longer, and as the 19th century wears on, these things get shorter, half stock, less material in them, obviously, but
and it's heavy.
And yeah, these are heavy. This one right here is actually in a 32, and just about all these guns that we've been buying here lately, we have the Maul, the J.M. Burns, the Leman, every one of them's coned. And so this is a 32. It looks like a 36 on the end, but it's coned.
It looks like a 65 from where the camera's sitting.
This is a heavy-duty gun weighing in, what did you say, 15 pounds?
Yeah, it's about 15.
It's a little lighter than that Burns, but the Burns has a brass ramrod, so...
Yeah, because I think you said the Burns was 18.
It depends. On one scale, I came out with 18, and one I came out with 16. I didn't weigh the ramrod, but it's got to be about a pound for that much.
I came out with 15 pounds on this thing.
So, yeah, very heavy barreled, octagon barrel, no swamp, no taper, no nothing. It's just as wide here. I know in some of the videos we've already had the shorts, it looks like it's tapered. That's the camera angle. It's literally the same width at the base as it is at the end. And so it is a heavy dude.
To put it into perspective for any of those you guys have been in the military, this rifle weighs just probably a little bit less than a squad automatic weapon, an M249. So
and all that weight is from here forward.
Yep, and that's why you can tell where people carry this gun is right here, because that's the center balance of this gun.
I find it very interesting because in the late 18th century, early 19th century, in the golden era of the flintlock, we have these swamp barrels, that, or at least tapered barrels, that are so beautifully balanced and small and light. And then by the time we get into the 1840s, 50s, these things are just huge.
Yep.
They're heavy.
Yep.
They're not well balanced, but I guess if you're propped up against a tree, they ain't going to move.
Well, now I know why Jeremiah Johnson really wanted to get away from that 30 caliber Hawken. He got tired of packing that thing around.
True fact. The bigger the caliber, the lighter the gun, because the barrel, the outside diameter of the barrel is the same, but the hole in it gets bigger. And so a gun like this weighs twice as much as a 58 caliber Hawken with a 30-inch barrel.
Slim Pickens would say an old mule would get sway back just to packing it.
Because you've literally got almost half the, you got way longer barrel, almost half, again, the amount of steel inside that barrel. And so anyway, and not counting the wood on the end too, it weighs a little more, but not much. Anyway, just kind of to sum this up, we'll get deeper into the history of it next week, but to describe to you how popular these things were, before Winchester ever put his name on a rifle, Leman had made 100,000 of these things. They made 14,000 Henry rifles.
They made 110,000 of the whole lifespan of the Smith & Wesson Model 1, and that was a very popular little handgun during the West. And that's a lifespan from 1856 clear up into the early 1900s.
Yeah, and so the thing is, these things were made, and when you would think the cartridge guns are coming out in the 1870s, these things should be dying off. Well, in 1873, they expand their factory because the orders just get bigger and bigger. Put it in perspective, Hawken made maybe, in the actual J&S pre-Gimmer Hawken days, they made maybe 5,000 rifles between 1825 and 1850. Leman had already put out well over probably 70,000, 60 to 70,000 of these things by that point. They were everywhere. If you go read the journals and the people who are looking, especially at natives, they're seeing these big 58 caliber trade guns that are Lemans everywhere in the West. One man said, whereas you might see the Hawken, you know, around the Missouri area, maybe out into the mountains, maybe a little east, this thing, they find them in Florida, they find them in Maine, California, you know, just all over the entire United States. Literally one of the most underrated rifles of the 19th century.
Yep. We need to do a video one of these days, the top 5 most underrated firearms in world history. This might be one of them.
This really comes in number 2 only to the Northwest trade gun, which is a smoothbore 62 caliber. And that's what it is. A lot of mountain men after 1835, these are going to be in their hands, way more of these than a Hawken, just because they're cheaper.
And they work just as good.
They do.
As long as you're probably a little bigger caliber than 32 in bear country.
Like I said, there's the Indian trade guns were always either 50 to 58.
Yeah.
These are hardware store guns. You might have found this for sale in somewhere in Tennessee, in some little mountain hardware store.
Yeah.
You know, in 1840, somewhere where they were hunting squirrels and not big, heavy game.
Reminds me of the rifles you see on the old Sergeant York.
Exactly.
I went and watched that again the other day, and they had one that actually looked, I'm pretty sure it was the later 1880s style Leman with the long Brunswick, I call it the Brunswick style lock plate.
See, even though this is not nearly as refined as what we call the Southern Mountain Rifle.
Yeah, you can definitely say that.
It's not as refined. This is kind of the continuation of it.
Yeah.
But this is also where we're getting into the Industrial Revolution, so there's a lot less hand fitting going on with these kind of guns. That's why the barrels aren't swamped or anything.
Yep.
Everything's got to, they're making them in mass, so everything's got to fit the same. It's hard to inlet a swamp barrel stock.
You ain't gonna get no barrel whip with that.
No, you're not. But anyway, without further ado, let's look at this, what I call the hardware store grade Leman rifle. Now this is what appears to, of course, be a Leman lock, but the markings have eroded away on this thing. It's just seen a ton of use. It's honest. It's honest as can be. The only thing, and you probably can't pick it up on this camera, is there is what looked like a C, but after a little further examination, we believe to be a 6, marked right back here. And there's a little bit of something up here, but it's completely unlegible at this point. One other thing to note, the spring's going to come out there. There is somebody has put a brass washer in here at some point. I don't know why. Every one of these pieces on the inside is marked with a 6. We thought it was a C till we looked very closely, just like on the front. And of course we have our spring and everything in here. We have a fly, but interestingly enough, if the camera can make it out, and I don't know if it can, there is, once again, just like on several of these rifles we've looked at, never been a provision for a half-cock notch. That's not the way this gun works. The way this gun works is you go to full cock, and you cannot pull the front trigger to set it off. You literally have to pull the back trigger. So they would have walked around with this thing on full cock, and the way these particular triggers on this gun that we will look at in a second are set up, you walk around on full cock, the back trigger is a safety. You cannot set it off by pulling the front trigger without pulling the back trigger first. So other than that, it's our standard percussion lock. Just once again, very interesting to note, we do have the fly here, but we don't have the half cock. And like I said, there's never been a lot of information really written about these, at least not all in one place. And so it kind of makes me wonder if this is a kind of a lower grade gun. Maybe you could get one with a half cock, because why add the fly if you weren't going to have it? But this one's obviously never had it. So it seems like the half cock option is something you could get. This one's never had it. Carry it on full cock with the safety of the back trigger, and that's really the only safety you have, and it seems to work pretty good. But that is our lock. We are going to do some definite cleaning on this because rust is eating this thing away. So let's move on to the stock. Now, as you can see, we have some issues here. We have a broken off toe, but we do have a toe plate, and it's wedged in there. And the elephant in the room is this stock's been broken completely in two and repaired at some time in the past. Wasn't the best repair they could have done. It looks like somebody's used some wood filler on it, but it seems to be solid enough. Now, we may wrap this with rawhide. We haven't decided yet. And look at this beautiful tiger stripe maple. Can you see how beautiful this would have looked originally? But if you look right here, you're like, what happened to the tiger stripe? Well, Leman was infamous for painting fake tiger stripe onto plain maple. And that's what happened to this gun. You can see where people just holding it up have rubbed the tiger stripe painting right off of there.
Was looking for a 50 caliber Leman. He settled for a 30, but it was a genuine Leman. You couldn't go no cheaper.
Couldn't go no cheaper, yep. So that's literally, he painted, that was, they're infamous for the non-high grade guns, the ones with the star. They actually have true tiger stripe maple. These ones have faux tiger stripe maple, and yes, they were doing that clear back in the 1830s. And right here you can see where that painting has worn off.
But Garrett, I have a star.
Standard Leman style rear butt plate, as you can see here, not quite as sharp as some, but it has this little rise. That's kind of common with Leman. Instead of coming straight back, it comes back and then comes up. Okay, so we're looking at this old U-car rifle here. It has a longer toe plate, and I mean, obviously you can tell the difference between a U-car and an original. Nothing here fits even close.
But it's the same concept.
It's the same concept, but much shorter here. I would say the Leman, in my opinion, is far better done.
Oh yeah.
All right, so let's move on down the stock here just a little bit. As we said, there is usually on the high end, I mean, we're losing a lot of junk. There's dirt and everything else in this. This gun has never been apart, I don't think, since it's been new. On a high-end gun, there will be a star right here usually, and that's literally their premier grade of gun. This one doesn't have that. Being a dual set trigger, I believe this is their hardware store grade, not necessarily even low as their trade gun, mid-range gun. But you can see there the brake. Then moving along, there is no star there, but what we found very interesting, if the camera can focus right here.
The star we have at home.
Somebody carved a star in the stock right here. And the funny thing is, it's the same shape and everything as the star that should be on the high-end gun. But of course, that other star would have been inlaid, a fancy piece of metalwork. Somebody just carved them a little star right here on the stock. Maybe they wanted to be fancy. But anyway, moving on down here. We have the brake, we have where our triggers would go, and this is terrible. This is why you take these things apart, guys. That is a combination of rust, dirt, and gunk in there. What is this, 180 years old?
Yeah, probably.
Something like that, probably. I'm going to say this is probably a late 1830s gun. And it is just full of gunk. We're taking it apart just to get some of that out of there. We're not removing anything we shouldn't. No patina, no nothing. But you got to get that rust and gunk and dirt out of there. It affects the way the gun operates. So, pretty good inlet work. Nowhere near as good inlet work as on the French musket, I would say.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's pretty good for what it is. Remember, this is a mass-produced gun. This would be like the Remington 1022 of the era.
Yeah, pretty much. This model.
Because they made a gazillion of them. They didn't have time to get real fine with it, but they're good guns. And obviously, this one's lasted almost 200 years. So, moving on down, we can have what we see here is a splice. This has broken off or been completely replaced at some point. If you can see that little line, it was very well done. And looking at the grain of the wood, I feel like this has been replaced and completely carved to match. The line goes right there and right there.
And also, over there by the tang, that piece has been replaced too.
Right here. These thin pieces have broken off and very, very carefully replaced. And
so what you're telling us is the people that replaced this weren't the people that fixed it.
No, I think this is something totally different. But moving on down, we're going to flip this thing around so we can go on down. Oops. Let's see.
There went the
stock just broke in half. I was like, ah! Alright, so you can see right here where people have carried it and rubbed the paint off. This is the maple we're dealing with. It's just a sugar maple. No real tiger stripe. It's a low-end maple. But that's fine. That's what Leman used on all of his economy guns. So, moving on down here, you're going to see some more of that, some more of that. We're going to get to our first entry pipe. Now, these are very cool because you could have just done brass pipes, but they actually have a little artwork around the ends of them here. Now, up here, we actually have a little bit of that faux tiger stripe paint left, which is kind of cool. Moving on down. Just looking it over for the first time myself, guys. So we get on down here, and what I find very interesting is we have this inlet brass piece, which is basically just to help keep the end from splitting out, which didn't do too good a job because we have some major cracks going on. If you can see those, cameraman, are we in a line?
It's on both sides too. Both ends of that forend have been replaced.
Roll it over that way. And you can see, yeah, that one needs glued bad. We got a crack right here that's coming out that absolutely has to be glued quickly. And rolling over, we have a completely re-glued piece here. And I find this very interesting because instead of going with a high-end expensive nose piece, they just let the wood come back out so it's a little thicker. So they would, you know, carve it down here so that it's nice and thin, and then just leave that out a little wider at the end versus putting an expensive nose cap on. That's pretty well all we're dealing with here with the stock. We need to oil this inside. We need to get things like this, which is gunk of some kind, out. It's in several places, and we need to glue a few cracks up. Let's move on to the barrel. So you can kind of tell a gun that has been slightly cared for in its life. Not everything on this gun's been cared for because nobody took it apart. But they did care for what they could reach without actually disassembling the gun, because oil in the cone here, and it is finger tight, and you can actually thread and unthread the drum into one of these, and that's something I have never seen. Usually they're so bound up you couldn't touch them with a a pipe wrench. All right, so we have our standard tang here. This is a pretty heavy duty barrel. Like I said, remember this is a 32. And right here, if the camera can make it out, Leman, L-E-M-A-N, Lancaster, warranted. So that's what makes this a Leman rifle. And if you go down here, you will see the number 3 stamped in the bottom of this barrel. This one was inspected by whoever number 3 was. And it looks like something's missing. Yes, it is, the back pin loop. It was not in the stock. We don't know where it is. They're easy to replace, you know, easy to make. We may make one of those. We may not even worry about it because it's a 32 and that screw in the tang holds the back of the barrel down pretty good. It's not like we're fighting massive recoil with this gun. Okay, so sliding on down, we have our middle pin loop right here. And you can see that they are just dovetailed in and then they hammer the dovetails down. Let me flip her around.
Turn them guns around, yeah.
Front pin loop there. And we have a very fine German silver front sight. This isn't brass, this is German silver. It gives it that white color. If we look out here on the end, we have a cone barrel. It's coned out to about 36 caliber, but the coning goes down about 2.5 inches to about right here. Actually, probably about where that engraved line is. And she tightens right on down to a 32 caliber. And here we have our rear sight, which once again, super fine notch, one of those you can barely see, squirrel rifle style rear sight. All right, we have what looks like an original ramrod because it really matches the same. This is not hickory. This looks like it's made from the same maple as the stock. And it has been broke right here and glued and repaired. So obviously we're not gonna put this ramrod through any kind of stress. We may make a completely different ramrod for this gun and just keep this one as a momentum to what was probably the original rod. I have a feeling if it had been replaced it would have been hickory or pine, but this is obviously maple. One of the other reasons I think it's original is this had a glued tip on it, and the glue is that common hide glue that they used way back in the day that didn't hold up very well. And you can see where the tip, which probably had a threaded end, came up to about right there, and it was hide adhesived on. And it looks like they had a rod or a pin running through it right there, so you'd had adhesive and a pin, and probably stuck out about that far, which would have made it stick out roughly an inch past the end of the barrel when it was all together. I think this is the original rod. I wouldn't swear to it, could be wrong, but somebody's done some repairs to this as well as the rest of the gun.
Merciful heavens!
Some people say you're completely destroying these guns when you take them apart. We just saved this gun's life. Look at what has landed there ever since I just took this out and shook it a little bit.
You're getting my patina all over the table there.
Yeah, guys, that's not patina, that's rust. And it's nasty rust on these set triggers. Just looking at them here, oh, this poor thing. I can tell you right now, the two things that have never been out of this gun, even though the barrel has been out, and, you know, it's been cleaned and everything, they never, ever took these triggers out. That's why they look like they do. They obviously they didn't, because it's a harder task to get the triggers out and back in. But we are talking about 180 plus years of gunk in there. And this part of the gun looks like a relic because no one ever took it out and cleaned it, which is what we're going to do. A lot of these guns will have a bar on the back of this front trigger right here that will raise when you pull the trigger, engaging a sear on the lock that will in turn drop the hammer and set the gun off. These guns don't have it, and I've seen several examples of this trigger type, and I can't remember off the top of my head what it's called. The only way for this gun to work is you literally cannot, you cock the hammer to full cock, but you cannot pull this trigger and set it off, and you cannot pull this trigger and set it off, because pulling the rear trigger obviously just brings that down. And if that's not set, pulling this does absolutely nothing because there's no bar reaching up to grab the sear. So this trigger is a safety trigger that removes the need for a half cock notch in the gun, because there's no way that the hammer can fall by the trigger being pulled unless the safety set trigger is set first. Then you pull the front trigger, which in turn launches this up and engages that sear. So not a lot going on here other than there is a marking under there, but I cannot make out what it is at this point. This trigger has to be clean, has to be taken apart and boiled. We really got to do some work on this because that is a rust bucket. All right, now we have that common Lancaster style, in this case Leman, trigger guard. And right here we have the number 3, same as the barrel. So whoever inspected the barrel also inspected the cast on this trigger guard. And it's just your common brass trigger guard, but it's got a little bit of a flare here. You know, we got these roundabouts back here and all this other kind of cool stuff going on. Really, really well done for a budget gun. Back then, you know, they put a little flare even on the cheap stuff. Today, it's all plastic and you know, Parkerization, and they don't put any flare whatsoever. But Leman always left some, even on the cheap guns. You're always going to find this little bit of flare going out on these things.
Hey, Garrett?
Yeah?
We can't wash the table off, or the tablecloth after this.
Why?
It has patina now.
Oh,
don't want to run.
We don't want to let's get all that patina and put it back in the trigger guard.
That was original to this tablecloth.
Yeah. We're just joking, guys, but you wouldn't imagine the amount of grief people give us if we take something like this apart and clean the triggers up. We're not removing true patina. Patina is dead rust. Patina is not growing, it's not hurting the gun, it's protecting it. And when we boil these parts, we are creating black oxide, which is dead rust. Basically means there's a little bluing going on and the gun is more protected than it's ever been. Like I said, if you look at this, you can tell they've taken parts out of this gun. They have never taken that out of that gun.
Nope. Been drug around through the mud a few times.
So what all do we have to do to this gun? Well, as always, we're going to separate this up into the metal work, which will be done by Ethan and Caleb, and woodwork, which will be done by me. I'm not going to obviously repaint any faux stripe on this.
Oh, man.
But I do not like the wood filler look in the stock. What do you think? This is your rifle, by the way. This is Ethan's rifle.
Yeah, you talked me into it, and I'm glad you did. I don't know. We'll figure out.
I'm thinking a nice piece of rawhide wrap. Not that it'll make it any stronger, but it will cover up the break.
No,
we are not rawhide wrapping it because Ethan doesn't want to cover up his star. It makes this a fancy gun.
I don't want to cover up my star that I have at home.
So anyway, I guess we're just leaving that then.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems to be holding up. If it breaks, we re-glue it with better wood glue than they had in the day. Mm-hmm. And so, there are a few other little ing-and-dings. The end of it has some cracks. Got to be glued up. Got to be taken care of on the woodworking end. Obviously, we got to clean and boil all the parts. Are we doing anything different with the lock, you think?
Not really.
Leaving that brass washer in there?
Yeah, it's hitting right where it needs to be. That's somebody's put on there, and it seems to work. So,
part of the story.
Part of the story, and I'm not going to mess with it, because if it ain't broke, I ain't going to fix that.
So, compared to the Burns rifle, which needed a lot of things, like broken tangs and a lot of broken wood re-glued up, what we're going to do on the wood end of this is glue those two deals up. I'm going to go in and re-moisten the lock mortise, moisten the inside of the barrel with some kind of paste wax. Not the inside of the barrel, the inside of the barrel channel, because as I've said before, what that does is it melts every time you shoot. The barrel gets hot, it'll melt down into the wood and adhere to the bottom of the barrel, preventing rust. We're going to boil all the small parts. I'm so cool. That is so cool that came out of there. And screws and everything. Are we going to replace this rear? We're going to make one and put it in there?
Nah, it'll be all right. Like I said, it's only a 32 caliber, and you've got 1, 2, 3 anchor points on here.
The weight of the barrel would hold it down without any loops, I'm pretty sure.
I mean, that 32 caliber recoil is pretty massive, but you know.
We've already actually had this thing out and shot it a couple times just because we realized it would shoot. And it's a laser beam. I mean, this thing shoots better than just about anything.
Yeah.
So, you have a 32.
Mm-hmm.
Caleb has a 32.
You got one of them great big old 30-06s.
I got one of them big old 36s. It is a 30-06.
That's where the
30 grains of powder and a 36 round
That's where
ball.
30-06 actually comes from.
So anyway, guys, remember, Smoke in the Woods sister channel starting up down there. It'll be linked in the description of this video, and our videos will be moving to Sunday night at 8:30.
Yeah, roughly.
That way we can, if we happen to fall behind or something, we've got a day to actually get a video filmed.
Yep.
So as always,
thank you for watching.
Trust in God.
Backwards. Trust in God.
No, it's thank you for watching.
Okay.
Trust in God.
Leave all that in.
And keep your powder dry.
Bye.
Bye.